Well, before user XXX Pussy Temptation comes in and tells us how bad this series is, because we always get one of those every time we talk about a series. We're big fans of Assassin's Creed.
Big fans.
And massive fans, huge fans. The thing with this series is I know some people have fallen off in terms of the franchise. You know, there's so many games and so much, but this is kind of the start of a series where we wanted to go through all of at least the main Assassin's Creed games and take a look at what makes them special, what we like so much about them, what actually makes these games matter and makes them different than other games in the franchise, and made people care. So we're kind of starting out with Assassin's Creed 1, we're going to go all the way through, and then I think at the end we're going to recap with the entire franchise.
It's my favorite game franchise. We played 2 at your house. That was the first game I played.
Yeah.
But the first game I actually really played on my own and got into was 3.
Okay.
Because I bought it on the Wii U.
Ah, the superior system.
The superior system.
You've heard of the PC Gamer Master Race, but
I'm the
there's the
Wii
Wii U
U
Master Race.
That is me.
Well, so today we're taking a look at the first Assassin's Creed game, and I think one of the most interesting things about this is just how it was created. We're going to TLDR it. There are better videos out there to give the full history of this game, but it was never intended to be Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
I think that's actually kind of interesting, and it was going to be part of another series that you have always had an interest in, even more than me, which is Prince of Persia. This was originally going to be a Prince of Persia spin-off. I believe for a while it was titled Prince of Persia Assassin, and it was just kind of going to be its own thing in the Prince of Persia universe, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's at the point where it's like far surpassed anything Prince of Persia ever accomplished. No offense, Prince of Persia fans. I'm just saying, like, look at how many Assassin's Creed games there are, look at how big of a cultural influence this has had, and it all just started as an idea of, what if we make a Prince of Persia spin-off?
Right. Well, and I think in defense of Assassin's Creed versus the Prince of Persia fans there, it would help Prince of Persia's case if they made a game more than once every 10 years.
The Prince of Persia fans agree with you.
And if they would actually release the remaster of the game like was supposed to come out in 2020, but now it's been delayed. As you can tell, I'm salty.
No, yeah.
Anyways.
I think everybody's kind of annoyed about that, but it's interesting how it was never intended to be a series.
Yeah. Yeah, I when I found that out, I was surprised. I can actually see how this game would be a Prince of Persia game, or a spin-off game, I mean. Because this game, obviously it takes place in a different time period in different parts of the world, but there's a lot of the same elements from Assassin's Creed than there is in Prince of Persia games.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's a lot of differences too, but knowing that information, I found that really interesting.
Well, especially the climbing. It really does come across, like, especially in Assassin's Creed 1, the climbing is almost a direct extension and evolution of the climbing in Prince of Persia.
Yes.
Which I think is, I don't want to keep overusing the word interesting, but once you start seeing that connection, you really can't unsee it.
Yeah. That and, like, the combat and everything else. It seems like it was like the next step after Prince of Persia.
And yet, like you pointed out, another thing that's really special about this game is that it's so simple. Like, yes, it is almost the next step of Prince of Persia, but compare it to later Assassin's Creed games, this is such a simple game.
Yeah, and especially if you compare this to Valhalla, where there's like millions of weapons. Or actually, I should say Odyssey, where there's millions of weapons. They went overboard on that.
Yeah.
Anyways, the game is so simple because there's just like not that much in the game. In terms of weaponry, outfits, combat,
countering, attacking with the sword, sneak stealth assassinations with the hidden blade. I mean,
it's very basic,
hand to hand, I guess. But yeah, it's almost Metroidvania though. If you notice how you start, because you start with nothing, or at least by chapter 2 you have nothing, and you work your way up, slowly unlocking new gameplay elements and new combat elements and weapons and stuff that then get you further in the game. I think that this might be one of the best Assassin's Creeds for doing that, where it'll be like, oh, you did something, here's a reward, now you can counter. You know,
right.
Maybe that sounds silly to someone, but it's interesting how you learn new techniques as you go.
It's almost like you're advancing your assassin skills.
Yeah, and arsenal.
Play through. Yeah.
And whereas in a lot of the later games, it's more like, here's a better statted weapon.
Right.
This is stronger. In this, it's like, here's an entirely new ability that now changes how you play the game. Very similar to the Metroidvania style, which I think is something they did very well here with that simplicity.
Well, and also I think it's interesting that it's not all in a tutorial style, because a lot of the Assassin's Creed games, and a lot of games in general, whenever they give you new techniques or new weapons or stuff that completely revamp the game, they're always in like the tutorial.
Mm-hmm. But what's interesting about that is, you when you start this game, you do have that stuff. You kind of get disgraced, you lose it.
Yes. Then you have to like get it all back again.
Yeah, and you're doing a whole mission where you just have no sword at all and no hidden blade, nothing. You just have your fists, and then after that, you're given the basic stuff. Mm-hmm. And then later on, like you said, you start to get upgraded. Like, here's a damage boost, that kind of stuff, to help you put up a fight.
Yeah, and I just think that's an interesting way of doing it. It's not all just like, oh, you're in sequence 1, here's all your weapons. You actually have to play a little bit of the game to get that stuff. So...
And speaking of that, in terms of playing the game, this game did a really good job of stringing you along with the story in a positive way. So they actually have a mystery in this game.
Ooh, a mystery.
A mystery. And I know that they have a lot of those throughout the series of, well, what are the gods doing? What's Juno really up to? All this stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's not like this overly complicated mystery. It's more like you are a victim of kidnapping at the beginning of this game. I mean, you, as Desmond Miles, you get kidnapped.
Yeah.
And you end up in the Abstergo building, and you're trying to figure out, who are these people? Mm-hmm. Like, what is Abstergo? What are the Templars? As you learn about things inside the Animus in Altair's era, you start to learn about them in the modern era too. And there's points in the game where you can kind of dig through the computer, or you can essentially talk to Lucy, or you can eavesdrop on Abstergo employees from the bathroom. Mm-hmm. Now, look, I know that's a bit of a violation of probably OSHA safety and some other workers' rights stuff.
This is the good timeline. Yeah, OSHA doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist at all. You can have as many broken ladders as you want.
Exactly.
But I always thought that was really cool, because they start filling you in a lot. And I do love that part of the later games where it's like, everything that's going on, you're learning little intricate details, but sort of that mystery at first of what is actually happening here. Mm-hmm. It's something this series I don't think is ever able to fully replicate after the first game.
Well, yeah, because especially the first game, and this is going to sound obvious, but the first game is the one that is supposed to establish the story. Mm-hmm. Again, I know that sounds obvious, but when you get to Assassin's Creed 3, I'm struggling here with names.
I know, we were talking about Kingdom Hearts before this.
When you get to Assassin's Creed 3, you already know the story, and it's just a continuation of that. But there is something very special and cool about the original Assassin's Creed game, where you have no knowledge of any of that stuff. When you put in the game and you play the game for the first time, without playing any of the other games, you truly don't even know what the Templars are. The Templars could be the good guys. You have no idea.
Yeah, I mean...
And you have to figure it out. You're playing in the eyes of Desmond.
Well, it's actually left a little open-ended, too.
Right.
Because when you have, like, Al-Mualim with his actions with the Apple of Eden and everything...
Right.
It reminds me a little bit of something like in, I should say, Assassin's Creed 3, and also in... Rogue.
Rogue is a good example.
Yeah, where essentially you have these examples of the assassins having done some pretty bad stuff.
Right.
Depending on who's in charge, who's operating at what given time, with what amount of leeway. I mean, even this game, I would argue that Altair almost starts out as the villain.
Right.
I mean, he straight up gets a fellow assassin killed. He almost ruins the entire order. But then by the end of it, you go through this transformation and character growth, and you kind of, like, realize this whole thing of, it's not about the assassins are right or the Templars are right. There's people in both of them that have good points and can be right. It's just that the assassins that we play as tend to be the ones throughout history and modern history who are more morally good than the Templars of that time.
Right.
But you look at Rogue... Shay Cormac was actually more morally good than some of the assassins of that time. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's interesting how this game starts to establish that moral ambiguity.
It really makes you as the player think. Like, think about, well, I am playing as the assassins who are supposed to be the good guys, but you're thinking, are they?
Yeah, or am I?
Yeah. And that's something I thought is very interesting, not just with this game, but just in general, too. And that's actually an element I loved about Rogue. I like you brought up Rogue there.
Yeah, sorry, I know. I don't mean to sidetrack us since we're on the first one.
Well, let's talk about Origins for a second.
Okay.
You know?
But yeah, I think that, too, with that, we already mentioned about how you're a disgraced assassin, which is different than a lot of the games. I will say with this game, I like that you start out as an assassin.
Yes.
Okay, this is an issue that you and I have with some of the games where...
So many of the games do this wrong.
You start out as just a normal person, and then you have to become an assassin. There's nothing wrong with that, but it takes so long to get there. With this, they have sort of the same progression path, but because you're a disgraced assassin who made a big mistake, you are slowly rising again through the ranks. So there's a history there of you having belonged to the assassins and having these abilities that justifies it not taking forever to get them. But, you know, you still have that video game progression where you slowly get better.
Yeah, that's something I thought this one did the best out of them all. With Syndicate, there was you start out as the assassins, and yes, there is some progression as you go through for sure, but it wasn't as noticeable as in this game. This game did it the best, in my opinion. Then you have games like 4, which I thought was fine. You know, you start out as like a pirate or, you know, whatever, and then you slowly get the assassin's clothes or whatever, and then you become an assassin. This game did it best because you actually start out as an assassin. I don't want to play as Ezio for 10 hours.
Right,
like Ezio the person. Ezio the person. I don't want to see him like carry a box.
And you know what's interesting about that is that only becomes, in my opinion, super good in the context of the 3 games tying together.
Yes.
In terms of just an intro to one game for Assassin's Creed 2, it's very slow.
It is very slow.
Connor in 3. And so I think that this game does a good job of springboarding you into that action. If this game handled it the way 2 did or the way 3 did, I don't think these games would be as popular. No. I think that people had the patience for that because of this game. You know, I don't think they would have gone in and waited for Ezio to go from normal playboy to insane assassin slowly. I just think a lot of players, they wouldn't have had the patience. And this game established that brand loyalty to Assassin's Creed that made people stick out all the stories and get to all the really good parts.
Yeah, and that ability to start out well along with the other stuff, I think really helped make this game the billion-dollar franchise that it has come to today.
Yeah.
I mean, we have movies. There's not only just the Embers and, you know, the Ezio movies. We have like a Michael Fassbender movie.
It's my favorite movie.
We're in the movie. In the movie, they literally, like, that's people's introduction to that character.
Right.
He's not in a game at all or anything. It's just, here's this character.
And we're not arguing this is a great movie.
No, but it still exists.
It became like a Hollywood massive
it still
film
exists.
Got made.
Right. And now with games like Valhalla, whatever your opinion is on the RPGs, there's still like millions upon millions of copies of these have sold.
And they still continue
and they still continue to sell to this day. Like, they've made millions of dollars off these games. So I think that kind of tells you that this game did something right.
Yeah, I mean, it really springboarded everything into action. And you pointed out, too, to me with this before that the time period in this game is also interesting. I think we can kind of breeze through a couple of things because we don't have a lot to say about these. But sort of an exploration of Middle Eastern culture with things like that. I mean, you kind of see that a little bit with Turkey in Revelations, where you start to see Constantinople and some other areas around Turkey and stuff. I think that's interesting, but this game is just very much rooted in these areas of like Jerusalem and Damascus, and you're kind of not taking place in the Crusades, but like seeing that aftermath of like the build up to a crusade and all that stuff going on. And that world is also intricately connected in between cities. There's pathing that allows you to travel between cities. This sounds ridiculously simple. Like, to somebody watching who's maybe like 13, this might sound like, well, games have done that forever. Yeah, but you have to remember how old Assassin's Creed is.
Right.
Like, this is mid-2000s. This was a big deal. Like, all of these natural pathways to be able to travel between games, and not just fast travel or not just breezing through areas, kind of taking your time learning the lay of the land, climbing viewpoints, and interacting with this world. At the time when this game came out, because of things like climbing and the kills and stealth, this was probably, I would say, one of the most interactive video game worlds of that era.
Oh, for sure.
It was ridiculously new to people.
Well, and all that stuff, the climbing, the combat, the traverseness of the map.
Traversal.
All I just made up a word. Traverseness, that's my word for the day.
That's good.
All of that stuff revolutionized games in general.
Yeah.
How many games after Assassin's Creed that came out had a style of Assassin's Creed climbing in it? How many games that came afterwards had maybe a better version of the original Assassin's Creed combat? Again, maybe a better version of it. But how have these elements of the game revolutionized the video game world in general?
You still see it with climbing.
Yeah.
I mean, look at something like Shadow of War or Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah.
You still see
a lot of climbing is
modern games
very
doing
prevalent in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the map itself is really cool in the original Assassin's Creed because none of the other games really do this. In games like 3, you have like the frontier, but then you basically exit the frontier and then it fast travels you to Boston or wherever you pick. In this game, you have like a intermap. Like there's the map itself where you have like Damascus, Jerusalem, all those other places. But you can actually leave and then go to like the mountain path, basically, is what I'm going to call it. Where in there you can actually pick where you want to go. Like you can travel to all these places, but they're all in the same intermap. And I thought that was really interesting because it expanded the game, or expanded the map. It gave it some depth to it, in my opinion. It made it seem bigger than what it was. You weren't just playing like, oh, here's Jerusalem. Oh, now we're going to Damascus. It was, oh, okay, well, here's a little connecting path to them. We're going to add elements to this game, to the map. We're going to add a whole new area with all new stuff to do in it. And I don't know. I just thought that was something that was really special about the original Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, it doesn't feel so much like you travel from one place to then a fast travel point to another, although you kind of do. Because you take the whole path, then you hit a point where it's like to Damascus.
Right, and then it does fast travel you there.
But load it.
Right.
But really, essentially, it's leading you right up to Damascus.
Right.
And it essentially just works as a glorified loading screen instead of feeling like they're just throwing you all over a world map. Yeah. I think that this kind of slice of, I don't want to call it slice of life, but like slice of an era of history is something that we didn't see a lot of in gaming. And I think that that's why people developed such a hunger for it, to be like, man, drop me into, like, you still see pitches for new time periods. We've done them ourselves. I'll be like, man, I'd love it if I got dropped into the American Civil War. Or for a while people said France, and then they got dropped into the French Revolution, with Unity and all these other time periods. And I think that it's one of those things where people can both learn some things about history, not that it's all accurate, but also it does a good job of kind of giving you that you're in this part of the world during this time period. Have fun.
Well, people, I would argue, don't get into history, obviously, as much as I do or other historians. I do think there is an element in us, though, that is fascinated about history. And even if you're not like a diehard historian, it still is cool to get dropped into the Crusades time period and run around Jerusalem.
Yeah, you kind of get to see what came before you.
Yeah.
How things got the way they were, what they used to be. And, one thing you kind of pointed out to me, I don't think we ever really used to read these, but when we were playing through Assassin's Creed 2, I believe, together, we played Assassin's Creed 2 on the Let's Play channel. Soon we're playing Brotherhood. You pointed out to me just how interesting they are, too, with historical descriptions. Like, yes, not everything is correct, but they've even talked about it before where they've had a rule where generally, and they've broken the rule a few times, but generally if there is a person who is real, they need to die in the same area at about the same point in time, even if you're the cause of it. So essentially they loosely follow those histories. It introduces that kind of thing of not just play history, but if you're interested in learning more about it too, here you go. And I think it would have been very easy for this game to be like, that whatever, fuck it. Damascus, 1422, we'll have this guy kill this guy, whatever.
Right.
And it's like, but he died in Jerusalem in like 1504. I don't care. It's fun game.
Right.
Like, they don't really do that kind of stuff on purpose. Even if you look at the crossbow, there was going to be a crossbow in this game. Mm-hmm. It's actually in the opening sequence, I believe, still like in the intro cinematic. The reason it was removed, to my understanding from knowing the history of this franchise, is they realized it did not fit the time period at all.
Right.
People didn't use crossbows at this time.
Yeah, I think they got called out and then were like, oh, crap, okay.
It wasn't a thing. So
Right.
then they were like, well, wait a minute. This would actually be better if we took that out. Like, it'll be more fun, more accurate. Like, we'll be able to make them get more close in for kills instead of kind of sitting on a roof and just be like, crossbow! Like, here's technology from like 50 years later. So they take those things into consideration, and not everything's perfect. A lot of things are made up too, with like magical artifacts and all kinds of stuff.
That would piss me off if it was like, oh, hey, you're playing in the Crusades. I don't know. What if we have like Genghis Khan randomly show up?
Right.
And it's just kind of like, oh, okay.
Well, it's especially worse because you called him Dingus Khan.
Oh, yeah, Dingus
Genghis Khan already slept with enough people. I don't want to know what Dingus Khan did to him. No, you're right. I think that respect, it's something I wish I saw more in games, and it's something this game really kind of brought back to the forefront of, there's nothing wrong with historical fiction. This is that. Mm-hmm. But to be able to show respect to those things and also make something fun.
It's historical fiction, but it's believable historical fiction.
And respectful.
Yes.
Like, I don't find it disrespectful. And I don't even find it disrespectful to the different religions it talks about or ways of life or anything. Like, everything's kind of fair game for them to talk about.
Yeah.
Everything's permitted and nothing is true. And that's kind of where we're going to leave it, I think. But I love this game. I love it so much. I know we kind of rambled on about it, and that'll probably be how this whole series is, since they're some of our favorite games. But let us know what you think in the comments down below. What are some of your favorite things about Assassin's Creed 1? What do you think made it special and great? Next up, we will be doing 2. We'll kind of roll through in a chronological order, like 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Just over time, so let us know what you think, and please be sure to check back, subscribe, and leave a like, and check out more. We're going to be making more Assassin's Creed videos in the future, so hope to see you there. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Please be sure to check out the description down below, where there's all kinds of ways to help support the channel. We have a Patreon. We have a thriving Discord community you can join. We have a lot of stuff down there. My wife, Jill, makes all kinds of really cool jewelry and gifts for members of your family. Stuff like that goes to help support the channel as well, so please check it out. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shway.